3 months after the community meeting, Maple Grove Lane looked different. Not physically, the manicured lawns remained, but something fundamental had changed. The HOA board was entirely restructured. Term limits were implemented. Transparent financial reporting became mandatory. The bylaws were rewritten to protect homeowner rights, not restrict them. Evelyn Hartsworth was no longer on the board, no longer the unofficial queen of the neighborhood. Her house went up for sale 6 months later, a quiet, almost imperceptible surrender. Mark continued living in his home, the phantom outline of the removed pool barely visible in his backyard. He becomes something of a neighborhood hero, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, consistent integrity. Tom Henderson, the retired lawyer, was elected as the new HOA board president. His first act? A comprehensive review of all past complaints and enforcement actions. But the most interesting development was something no one saw coming. Late one evening, Mark received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a handwritten note. Some battles are won by standing still. Some truths are revealed by simply existing. Thank you for showing us a different way. The note was unsigned. Mark smiled, understanding immediately. It wasn't about him. It was about the community finding its true voice. The pool was gone, but something far more significant had been built in its place. A community, rebuilt, reimagined. The moment the pool cover came off, Evelyn Hartsworth knew she'd made a mistake. Her perfectly manicured lawn, a testament to 15 years of suburban warfare, was about to become ground zero for her most epic battle yet. Mark Sullivan, the newest homeowner on Maple Grove Lane, had committed the ultimate sin. He was removing his backyard swimming pool, and Evelyn was not going to let this stand. The pool was a monstrosity by her standards, an above-ground eyesore that rose like a blue and white tumor from the otherwise pristine landscape. For years, she tried to get Mark to conform to the unspoken rules of their neighborhood. Subtle hints, passive-aggressive HOA newsletters, strategic complaints, nothing had worked. Now, as a team of workers began dismantling the pool, Evelyn's perfectly lined eyes widened with a mixture of rage and calculation. Her hand gripped her phone so tightly her French-tipped nails nearly punctured the screen. This is a violation, she muttered to herself, scrolling through the HOA bylaws she knew by heart. There had to be something, anything, she could use to stop this municipal massacre of suburban aesthetic. Mark wiped sweat from his brow, directing the workers with a casual efficiency that made Evelyn's blood boil. He was new to the neighborhood, but he clearly didn't understand the delicate ecosystem of Maple Grove. You didn't just remove a pool without consulting the powers that be. The workers continued their methodical deconstruction. Metal supports came down, blue panels were stacked, and the once proud pool gradually transformed into a pile of components. Each piece felt like a personal attack to Evelyn. She remembered how she tried to befriend Mark when he first moved in. Homemade apple pie, a welcome basket filled with local restaurant gift cards, an invitation to the annual HOA summer barbecue. All rejected with a polite but firm disinterest that bordered on rudeness. What was he hiding? Why didn't he want to integrate into their perfect community? As the last section of the pool was dismantled, Evelyn's phone was already dialing. Not the local authorities know she had more direct methods. The HOA board would hear about this immediately. "Hello, Robert," she said, her voice a razor-sharp whisper. "We have a situation on Maple Grove. Mark Sullivan is destroying neighborhood property values as we speak." Little did Mark know, Evelyn Hartsworth was just getting started. And in the world of homeowners associations, she was a force of nature that no one, not even a stubborn newcomer, could easily dismiss. The pool was gone, but the real battle was just beginning. The emergency HOA board meeting was called within hours of Mark's pool removal. Evelyn had made sure of that. Conference Room B of the Maple Grove Community Center buzzed with tension. Robert Calloway, the board president, adjusted his reading glasses and listened intently as Evelyn presented her case. Her meticulously prepared presentation included aerial photographs, property value charts, and a detailed breakdown of how Mark's actions threatened the very fabric of their community. "We have bylaws for a reason," Evelyn declared, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. "Those bylaws protect our investments, our aesthetic, our entire way of life." Mark sat quietly at the end of the long table, looking more amused than concerned. He was a software engineer who'd moved from Silicon Valley, bringing with him a decidedly different approach to community living. His casual demeanor, crisp polo shirt, well-worn sneakers, a hint of a tech conference lanyard peeking from his jacket pocket was everything Evelyn despised. "Ms. Hartsworth," Robert interrupted, "could you explain precisely which bylaw Mr. Sullivan has violated?" This was the moment Evelyn had prepared for. She clicked her remote, bringing up a complicated flowchart. Section 7, subsection C clearly states that any significant landscape modification requires prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Mark leaned forward. "I removed a personal property item from my backyard. I didn't change the landscape. The ground remains exactly the same. A murmur ran through the room. Board members exchanged glances. Evelyn's perfectly constructed argument was starting to wobble. Furthermore, Mark continued, the pool was a safety hazard. It wasn't up to current municipal codes. I have the inspection reports right here. He slid a thick folder across the table. Evelyn's face flushed. She hadn't anticipated such a prepared opponent. Her usual tactics, emotional manipulation, procedural nitpicking, implied social consequences, were meeting unexpected resistance. Robert began carefully reviewing the documents. Each page turn felt like a potential nail in Evelyn's argumentative coffin. Ms. Hartsworth, Robert said finally, it appears Mr. Sullivan has followed all necessary legal procedures. The pool's removal was not just his right, but potentially a responsible community action. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. For the first time in her decade-long reign of heroic terror, she was being told she was wrong. Not just wrong, irrelevant. Mark gathered his documents, offering a polite nod to the board. Thank you for your time. As he walked out, Evelyn's mind was already plotting her next move. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove Lane, a neighborhood that looked peaceful. Deceptively peaceful. Because Evelyn Hartsworth was not the type to admit defeat. Not now. Not ever. Evelyn's home office was a war room of sorts. Bulletin boards covered in neighborhood maps, sticky notes with meticulous annotations, and a digital archive that would make most private investigators look amateur. She wasn't finished with Mark Sullivan. Not by a long shot. Her first move was reconnaissance. She hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Roger who specialized in neighborhood compliance investigations. For 3 days, he documented Mark's every move. Trash can placement, lawn maintenance, vehicle parking, weekend activities. Nobody is this clean, Evelyn muttered, studying the reports. And yet Mark was. His trash cans were always precisely positioned. His lawn, though not as manicured as her own, met every municipal code. His car, a modest electric Satan, was always parked perfectly within his property lines. But Evelyn was nothing if not persistent. She discovered Mark worked remotely for a Silicon Valley tech company. Perfect. She could use that. A series of anonymous complaints were filed with the city, zoning violation, home business permit questions, noise ordinance potential breaches. Each complaint was crafted to sound legitimate, yet vague enough to trigger investigations without direct blowback to her. Local authorities began showing up, building inspectors, zoning officials. Each visit was a small victory for Evelyn, a potential wedge to drive Mark out of the neighborhood. What she didn't know was that Mark was a formidable opponent. Every official who arrived was met with impeccable documentation, calm professionalism, and a level of transparency that made her carefully constructed complaints dissolve. Meanwhile, her reputation was starting to change. Neighbors who once feared her began to whisper, "Have you seen what she's doing to Mark? This seems excessive." The turning point came unexpectedly. During a neighborhood block party, an event Evelyn had organized for years as her personal social control mechanism, people started asking questions, not about Mark, about her. "How many complaints have you filed this month, Evelyn?" asked Tom Henderson, a retired lawyer who'd always been politically neutral. Her smile froze. For the first time, she realized her tactics might be backfiring. Mark, observing from a distance, said nothing. He didn't need to. Evelyn was digging her own hole, and she didn't even realize how deep it was becoming. The neighborhood was changing, and Evelyn Hartsworth was about to learn that control is an illusion, especially in a community that was growing tired of her manipulations. The local police station was not a place Evelyn Hartsworth was accustomed to visiting. Her world was carefully curated, manicured lawns, pristine HOA meetings, controlled social interactions. Yet here she was, sitting across from Detective Laura Rodriguez, trying to explain why she had filed her 7th complaint against Mark Sullivan in 3 weeks. "Ma'am," Detective Rodriguez said, her voice a mixture of patience and barely concealed irritation. "These complaints are baseless. We investigated each one thoroughly." Evelyn's perfectly pressed blazer seemed to deflate slightly. Her meticulously highlighted hair, a testament to weekly salon appointments, suddenly felt like armor losing its shine. "He's disrupting the neighborhood," Evelyn insisted. "Someone has to maintain standards." Rodriguez slid a file across the table. Inside were copies of all the previous investigations, each one stamped with "no violation found" in bold red letters. What Evelyn didn't know was that Mark had been quietly documenting everything. Every complaint, every investigation, every interaction. What had started as a simple removal of a backyard pool had transformed into a systematic exposure of her harassment. Back in the neighborhood, things were changing. The old guard of Maple Grove, those who had silently supported Evelyn's crusades, were growing uncomfortable. Her tactics were no longer subtle. They were becoming desperate. Tom Henderson, the retired lawyer, had started asking questions, not just about Evelyn's complaints, but about the HOA's historical practices. How many homeowners had been quietly bullied? How many dreams had been crushed under the guise of community standards? Mark, for his part, remained calm. He understood something Evelyn never would. True power isn't about control. It's about integrity. His tech background had prepared him for this. He had dealt with complex systems, understood how networks of power operate. The HOA was just another system, one that could be navigated, understood, and ultimately transformed. A community meeting was called, not by the HOA, not by Evelyn, but by the homeowners themselves. Mark didn't organize it. He didn't need to. The momentum was building on its own. Evelyn received the invitation. Printed on standard paper, it looked innocuous. But she knew this was not going to be a typical neighborhood gathering. Something was changing. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Hartsworth was not in control of the narrative. The pool was gone, but the real battle was just beginning. The community center was packed, every chair filled. Standing room only. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a referendum. Evelyn arrived precisely at 7 p.m., her heels clicking a staccato rhythm of defiance. She dressed for battle, navy blue power suit, pearl earrings, hair pulled back in her signature tight bun. But something was different. The room didn't part for her like it used to. The whispers weren't deferential. They were critical. Tom Henderson, sitting near the front, held a thick folder. Years of HOA documentation, complaints, violation notices, a paper trail that told a story far more complex than Evelyn had ever intended. "We're here," Tom began, his voice carrying through the packed room, "to discuss the systemic issues within our homeowners association." Mark sat quietly in the third row. He hadn't sought this moment, but he wasn't avoiding it either. Evelyn's hand gripped her leather portfolio. This wasn't going according to plan. Tom began systematically dismantling the HOA's historical practices, selective enforcement, discriminatory actions, financial irregularities that had gone unnoticed for years. Each revelation was met with gasps, murmurs of recognition. "Ms. Hartsworth," Tom said, turning to face her directly, "how do you explain these repeated violations of basic homeowner rights?" The room went silent. Evelyn's world, her carefully constructed universe of control and compliance, was crumbling, not dramatically, not with a crash, but with the precision of a surgical procedure. Each layer of her fabricated reality was being peeled back. Her reputation wasn't just being challenged, it was being systematically deconstructed. Mark hadn't said a word. He didn't need to. The documents spoke. The neighbors' experiences spoke. The truth was speaking. When the meeting concluded, Evelyn found herself isolated. The power brokers who had once supported her were quietly distancing themselves. Her network was dissolving. Outside, the streetlights of Maple Grove Lane flickered. A metaphorical changing of the guard. Mark walked to his house, nodding politely to neighbors. But everyone knew. Something fundamental had shifted. Evelyn sat in her car, staring at her meticulously maintained home. For the first time in decades, she felt something she'd never experienced before.